26/2024. As I've previously outlined, Appendix B to this report contains exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A. This is information that cannot be disclosed in order for Council to hold a full and unfettered debate on a matter and make a decision. We are advised to exclude the press and public. Having said that, any member wishes to make a statement on this item without referring to anything in the exempt Appendix B, I will allow that before we go into exempt session, and I will allow them to speak again once more in the exempt session. So to be clear, a member can refer to Appendices A and C, but not Appendix B or the supplementary update to the motion. Members must not indicate on how they may vote. Any member is in any doubt that they may stray into the exempt appendix, then they should wait until we go into private session before speaking. Are members clear on that? Okay. Does anyone wish to? So how can we propose it when it's got an exempt item? Okay, we've got to propose the we've got to propose the motion first. Councillor Watt.
I'm not quite sure what I'm proposing this morning. I would speak, but there's nothing in those public pages that I could say that wouldn't indicate.
Stand, please.
Oh, I do beg your pardon. I wasn't totally prepared for this, Chairman.
So if you propose the item in general terms, Councillor Waller, then I think we can proceed.
I propose the item in general terms. I propose that we move to discuss report number 26/2024.
Do we have a second? Councillor Johnson. Okay, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. What I want to say is, whilst there is no statutory requirement to provide sports and leisure services, the evidence and data for the benefits of physical activity are compelling. Physical activity is one of our 5 ways to well-being, and it can help us to live longer in better health. And whilst we are living longer, we are doing so in poorer health. And some of this is preventable. A government report in 2022 called Applying More Our Health indicated that physical activity can reduce dementia by up to 30%, reduce hip fractures by up to 68%, reduces cardiovascular disease by up to 35%, can reduce type 2 diabetes by up to 40%, reduces colon cancer by 30% and breast cancer by 20%. And what I also want to talk to you about is one of the biggest causes of death at home for those that are over 65 is either falling down or falling over. Now, according to the Office of Health Improvement and Disparities, we are an ageing population, and this is no different in Rutland. In fact, Rutland have a higher rate of people over 65 than the England average. And also, according to this data, Rutland does have a higher than England average of reported musculoskeletal issues. Now, musculoskeletal, or MSK as we call it, is an umbrella term for hip, knee, back, neck issues, those sorts of things. And we also know that MSK is the second most common reason for absences from work. 28.2 million days are lost per year to MSK issues. The number one reason is mental health. With an ageing population comes an ageing workforce, and regardless of what political party you are aligned to, they all agree that we need to grow the economy, and to do this we need a healthy workforce. Physical activity is also good for social connections, and evidence from the National Institute of Aging suggests that isolation is as bad for our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It can also shorten our lifespan by 15 years. Now, in June 2023, Sport England published a report that advocates the benefits of physical activity. And within this report, it also highlighted the return on investment. So for every £1 spent on sport and physical activity, we can see, or should see, a return of £3.91 of social and economic value. Now, I work in the drug and alcohol sector, and the return on investment is for every £1 that's spent, it equates to £4 in savings. And we regard this as pretty good. So what you will see is this is roughly on the same par. I think what I am trying to say and what I'm going to conclude with is we cannot underestimate the value of physical activity and its benefits. Thank you.
Councillor Clark, Councillor Stevenson, and then Councillor Powell.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to start by making two really blindingly obvious points. Residents are passionate about the Catmose Sports Centre. I know this from when the decision taken in January 23 was published, from the letters, the emails, the social media posts, and perhaps on a very personal level, the urge to have a public meeting where members of the public could share their views and ask questions. This evening, and I am very mindful of what you have said, Chair, we are asked to approve recommendations or not in the exempt paper. This is a really complex and difficult decision. I feel particularly sorry for Oakham councillors. We're relatively fresh from an election. Pledges, promises are fresh in residents' minds. And I think it is a very difficult decision for all of us to take. There may be a conflict between listening to residents and, of course, party loyalty. I'm mindful, Chair, of what you have said about not referencing what the decision is or indeed giving an opinion. What I'm about to do is raise issues which I think are key, pertinent issues which we need to consider. The first one is the process in which this decision has been taken. The fact that it is, as very clearly explained, in private session as it was in January. And I'm going to quote the Liberal Democrat press release because I think it captures things very well. Residents are fed up with decisions being made behind closed doors. I hope this evening, having heard an excellent explanation from the Chair, residents will be reassured that we have no choice but to take that decision and exempt, just as was the case in January. I move on, and I think, sorry, Councillor Carr, you've done a far better job than me. I think there is a key issue around what a council provides in terms of just delivering statutory requirement whilst balancing the other considerations. Positive impacts on health and well-being, community groups, and actually I think something that's really pertinent for Rutland, we are in a rural context. Access to service and amenities isn't that of our urban counterparts. Our transport system, and I think we do an incredibly good job in difficult circumstances, means that particularly for our young people who may not be able to drive, accessing leisure, we absolutely need to be considering that in the exempt session. The other context is the same for any local authority. It is that of funding for local government, balancing books, living within means, protecting our most vulnerable. I don't think anybody would disagree that that is a key issue in this decision. I will now reference 2.3.9 in the public-facing paper. It's very clear there. It says, if there is to be ongoing financial support for the provision, additional savings or service reductions beyond the 4.5 million already approved in the budget need to be made. It is reasonable, therefore, to suggest that the current administration has not allowed for the possibility of proposals requiring ongoing support. Again, we will need to consider that net zero position. That was the intention of the contract in 2009. It changed with the pandemic, as did an awful lot of life. again, a deliberation perhaps for exempt session. I will conclude now, Chair. It is a really, really complex issue. It is a single issue that actually highlights the challenges faced by local governments and by default all of us having to make horrible, difficult, challenging decisions. However, we are the custodians of democracy. It is through our comments, our statements, our press releases and our debate that we can demonstrate that we have listened to residents, taking on board very valid points made. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Stevenson, Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. And I also will be very careful not to stray into any exempt items. It is a difficult decision for all of us councillors, and has already been stated for lots of reasons in terms of our priorities as a council, our response to residents, and our budget, bottom line. It's not just about costs, it's about all those things, and we've got a very difficult decision to make. I would just like to point out a couple of omissions on the timeline on Appendix A, if I may, on page 148. Firstly, the Cabinet decision on 14th February 2023 authorised an extension of the Stevenage leisure contract for up to 24 months and the undertaking of a new procurement exercise which would not discount alternative bids for some financial risk, that's stated. There is a phrase missing from this statement of the decision, and I quote, in order, that procurement exercise, in order to enable the development and implementation of a new model for future provision. Secondly, in that timeline, there was also a Cabinet meeting on the 15th of August 2023, which is not included in the timeline, and this considered the outcome of the initial tender stage. That is all in the public papers. At this meeting, the Cabinet decided to proceed to stage 2 of the procurement of the leisure operator, noting that the contract award will be a decision of Council or Cabinet, depending on value, and also quoted in line with the Council's contract procedure rules. So just a few sort of things that I find a bit puzzling about this process. Back in August, there was indication of the initial tender. It went to stage 2, but it seems to me that there was a bit of a lack of clarity on the overall strategy and principles at that stage about the issues involved. And the second thing is that the previous Cabinet decision was to enable development and implementation of a new model. What was actually done before going into the next stage of procurement? The current contract was extended to March 2025, so plenty of time to do proper diligence on exploring other options and procurement conditions. The second tender, as it states in the timeline, actually closed on the 3rd of November. That is nearly 5 months ago. There was ample chance to have discussions around the budget, but the budget has been set, as it states in the paper, on a net nil revenue position. Why on earth would this current meeting not held before that budget meeting in order to address this? It's obviously right that this decision comes straight to Council, but there has been no recommendation from Cabinet. So it's down for all of us councillors to consider all the issues. But there has been ample time to relook at the model. There has been ample time to be open about the approach on providing such services. But it's down to us as all councillors in the exempt session to have a full discussion about it. Councillor Johnson last month at the budget meeting said a few words, and one of them, which is timid, does come to my mind. Thank you.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Chair. There are 4 contextual points that I would like to make. Firstly, the original intent of this council in 2005 was the creation of a sports and leisure centre, and there was no mention at that time of a new academy, which only arose in July 2006. Under the big build of 2007, the principle of a community centre, including a new school, was established, and the school was only one part of that centre. The community centre opened to the public in 2009. The second point I want to make is about the impact of academisation in April 2011, with the transfer of all land and non-school building, in other words, community assets, to the new Catmose Academy Trust by the government. Successive Rutland MPs did nothing to secure restitution for Rutland residents for the loss of those assets, and later academisations in England did not entail the loss of community assets as legislation was changed to ensure their retention. Thirdly, there is the true availability and accessibility of alternatives, which has been highlighted to us by our constituents, some of whom have physical and mental health issues. They highlighted the ease of access to Catmose and the availability of group classes. They also highlighted that the alternative gyms list is not up to date and many of these are heavily subscribed. All constituents highlighted the role of Catmose as a community centre, a meeting place. One had recently been referred by his GP to Rutland Sports Centre rather than Catmose, but does not drive and now finds accessibility difficult, being dependent as he is on buses. And that finally brings me to our neighbour, Melton, as an object lesson for us, where I have learned that they have recently renewed the management contract for their sports facility. And they are in a slightly different position from us, but they are investing 1.75 million, comprising part self-funding and part borrowing. Critically, they own the assets. And over the 10 years of that this facility will be managed, they expect to gain £1 million over that period. We, in contrast, lost our assets. In conclusion, we now have the obscene situation of residents being granted increased access to the facilities of our private schools, while assets intended and paid for by this community have been captured progressively by an academy trust. All this whilst our MPs have remained silent and RCC takes the blame. Thank you.
Councillor Ross. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Chair. I wrote some of what I intend to say here without taking full consideration of the division between the open session and the exempt session.
You need to be very careful in what you're going to say.
I intend to be very careful, but I thought it was best if I say that before I spoke. I want to speak about risk assessment. And I believe that I can discuss this in general terms as long as I don't describe any of the detail of what I have read in the exempt papers. Am I correct in this?
You can't refer to anything in the exempt papers at all. If you are going to do anything like that, you need to reserve your speech to the exempt session.
Then I will not refer to anything in the exempt papers, but I will speak about risk assessment in general as a process that all businesses and authorities undertake when they're making decisions of this kind. Good risk assessment involves a series of measurements that include the type of harm that may occur if a particular decision is taken or not taken. It includes the likelihood that that harm will occur. It includes an assessment of the severity of the harm, and it includes identification of strategies that may either avoid or mitigate that harm. It appears to me that there are two routes that the Council can take when assessing risk. We can assess risk to the Council, or we can assess risk to our residents, who will be the ultimate beneficiaries or sufferers of our decisions. I think I conclude my statement by saying that I hope that the Council will, in its later deliberations, take full account of both of those targets of risk, both the Council and also the residents that we represent. For there are different risks to each of those groups with different severities and different mitigations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. I will now, from the Chair, move that we go into exempt session. Who's on seconder? Councillor Harvey. All those in favour?
I think that's unanimous, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, the motion is approved.